Hello and good day to you. My name is Mike Bullen and this is Codex English. You're watching Newsflash, the series in which we have a look at two of the world's biggest news headlines and learn English through them. Now, this week's episode is going to be shorter than usual, and that's because this week I only have one story for you. And the reason for that is, well, if I'm honest, it's simply because I have been extremely busy these last 2 or 3 days, and so I've only had time to do one story for this week's episode. Okay then, so with that said, let's read this week's news story, singular story for this video. Okay, let's go. Okay then, so the first and only story of this week's episode brings us over to the New York Times news website. So let's have a look at the headline. Here we go. So the headline here reads, Boris Johnson apologizes to the Queen for 2 pandemic parties at Downing Street. Okay, all right then. So Boris Johnson is saying sorry. He is saying sorry to the Queen for 2 pandemic parties then. Okay, so now I'm sure most of you know this word by now, pandemic, but just in case there are some of you that do not know this word, a pandemic is a noun and it describes when a disease spreads across either a whole country or around the world, across different countries, okay? Now, a pandemic party, now what this is referring to is a party that took place during the pandemic and was against the rules, was not supposed to happen. So it's very naughty, all right? So Boris Johnson here, he's apologizing, saying sorry to the Queen for having these 2 parties during the pandemic period here. Okay, at Downing Street. Have a look here at Downing Street. So, Downing Street, number 10 Downing Street. That's where the Prime Minister lives in the UK, and that's Boris Johnson at the moment. Right then, so let's read a paragraph then from the article and find out just what Boris Johnson was getting up to at these 2 parties then, shall we? Here we are in language focus mode then, everybody. So, the paragraph reads, capping a week of abject contrition, Prime Minister Boris Johnson of Britain apologised on Friday to Buckingham Palace for raucous parties held in Downing Street the night before Queen Elizabeth II buried her husband Prince Philip in a socially distanced ceremony that left her grieving alone in a choir stall. Okay then, so we certainly have some very interesting vocabulary for you in this episode, this story here. Let's begin then. The paragraph starts off with this verb here, cap. So to cap something means to finish that thing, essentially, okay? So I could say that if I have a bottle and then I have the lid, otherwise called a cap, then I will place the cap on the bottle and I would say I capped the bottle. So I put the final part on top of something to cap something off. Cap off something. We use the preposition off there quite often too when using this verb, to cap something. So in the context of this sentence here, capping a week. So you could change this word to ending a week. Putting the final thing, the final part of this week onto the end of it, and that would be to cap off the week, to finish a week, to end a week of abject contrition. And the meaning would be the same there. Okay, so capping a week of abject contrition. So we have an ADJ and a noun. Okay, so the adjective abject is used before a noun to emphasize that the situation is very, very terrible and serious, abject. So for example, if there is a girl who is very, very, very scared, I might describe her as experiencing abject terror. So the level of terror is extremely severe, very negative, an adjective emphasizes the noun there, the meaning that it's very, very terrible. Okay, so the noun in this sentence here is contrition, abject contrition. So, contrition is a strong feeling for when you've done something extremely bad and you feel very sorry for doing that very, very terrible thing. A synonym for this word is remorse. Remorse. I'll put it here for you. Remorse. And it's the same thing. Okay. I feel great remorse for something. You feel really bad for doing something wrong. Okay then. So the whole week then, capping a week of abject contrition, Prime Minister Boris Johnson of Britain apologised on Friday to Buckingham Palace for raucous parties. All right then. So this adjective here, raucous. Okay. So a raucous event or a situation that is raucous is a very noisy, loud situation. This is also used to describe a situation in which people may be behaving badly as well. Okay, so a raucous party would be a really loud, noisy party that's probably bothering other people. People are laughing really loudly, shouting, yelling, making a lot of noise. So that is a raucous party here. Oh dear. Okay, so for raucous parties held in Downing Street the night before Queen Elizabeth II buried her husband, Prince Philip, in a socially distanced ceremony. So we've got socially and distance here together to form a compound adjective, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with social distancing nowadays, and indeed that is to maintain a safe distance from other people. Do not get too close to others. Okay, so socially distanced what? A socially distanced ceremony. Ceremony. A ceremony is a noun and it describes any kind of formal event such as a wedding. Simple as that, like a wedding. Okay, so in a socially distanced ceremony that left her, as in Queen Elizabeth II, grieving alone. Grieving, okay. So to grieve, it's a verb. If you grieve, it means that you show or feel extreme sadness for something, and that's usually for when somebody dies. So you can grieve the death of somebody that you love, for example. Okay, grieve. Normally something that you've lost in terms of a thing. So then, Queen Elizabeth II was left grieving alone in a choir stall. Choir stall, okay. Pay attention to the spelling for this word. It's a bit unusual and it makes the sound Y. Choir stall. Okay, so first of all then, to understand this noun here, we'll start with the word choir. A choir is simply a group of people who all sing together, and especially in a church. This is commonly used to describe a group of people who sing together in a church there. So a stall, a choir stall, this describes the place in which the choir sings. The place in a church where the choir will sit or perhaps stand when they sing in the church. That's all it means there. So the article here is saying Queen Elizabeth II was left grieving alone, sitting in this part of the church. It's a bit of a controversial story in the UK, as you can probably imagine. There we go then. So that was the story for this week's episode, and as I said, that was the single and only story for this week's episode. There we are. Well, I do believe that's all that I have for you in this week's episode of Newsflash here. But we did have some really interesting vocabulary, didn't we, in tonight's story? I do recommend that you practice using the adjectives abject and raucous in sentences of your own, as they will definitely boost your descriptive performance for both speaking and writing in English. Okay, there we go. So now, as usual, please do feel free to leave me a comment down below. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer as usual then. Okay. Right, well, I think we'll wrap it up and we'll leave it there in this episode then. So, thanks very much for watching. Hope to see you again in a future episode, and cheerio.